This episode of Wine and Crime is brought to you by Progressive Insurance.
Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies.
Try it at Progressive.com.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
If you love chilling mysteries, unsolved cases, and a touch of mom-style humor, Moms and Mysteries is the podcast you've been searching for. Hey guys, I'm Mandy.
And I'm Melissa. Join us every Tuesday for Moms and Mysteries, your gateway to gripping, well-researched true crime stories. Each week, we deep dive into a variety of mind-boggling cases as we shed light on everything from heists to whodunits. We're your go-to podcast for mysteries with a motherly touch. Subscribe now to Moms and Mysteries wherever you get your podcasts.
Exciting news, Wine Coven! We, the Wine and Crime Gals, for the first time ever, are coming to Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Yes!
We will be live at the historic Lobo Theater on March 15th, 2025. And there are general admission as well as VIP tickets on sale now at wineandcrimepodcast.com. And those VIP tickets get you preferred seating, a signed poster, and a post-show Q&A to ask us all of your burning questions.
Yes, we are so excited to be visiting the gorgeous American Southwest. It is one of my favorite places in the country.
She loves it.
I love it. The live show starts at 7 p.m. Doors open at 5, so you can come grab a drink and some food and mingle together with your fellow Coven members before the show. But wait, there's more. We will also have a booth at the Beyond the Crime Convention, which is an immersive all-day event that brings together true crime survivors, family members of the missing, detectives, advocates, true crime podcasters,
Us.
creators advocating for the voiceless, and true crime fans who are invested in helping solve crimes. So, if you want to stop by and see us and some of our other favorite true crime pod friends, we have a lot who are going to be there. I'm so excited. Be sure to check out Beyond the Crime Convention.
Tickets for all of these events are going fast, so don't miss out on an amazing day and night with your gals. Head to wineandcrimepodcast.com for tickets and info on both of these amazing events, and we'll see you on March 15th. Woo-woo. Wine and Crime contains graphic and explicit content which may not be suitable for some listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
You are listening to Wine and Crime, the podcast where two friends chug wine, chat true crime, and unleash their worst Minnesotan accents.
You darn tootin' they do.
Darn scootin'. I'm
Darn
Lucy.
scootin'. I'm Amanda.
Oh, today's gonna be a doozy.
It's a dooz.
And I will say, I was so thirsty while I was researching this particular topic.
I bet. I'm personally pairing with water today, too.
Yeah, all the water.
Mm-hmm.
So today we have a very special me pick.
Yep. Let's be real.
I was looking at something on PBS and they were talking about this topic and they were like photographs and stories. And I was like, this is horrifying.
Yeah.
We have to talk about it.
Yeah.
So today we present to you Dust Bowl crimes.
And I'm wearing my Everything is Dust sweatshirt.
Because everything was indeed dust.
Truly dust.
Coated in dust.
Drenched.
It was actually dirt. Very fine dirt.
The finest dirt.
Dirt Bowl doesn't quite have the same ring to it.
It sure doesn't. It really doesn't.
We're going to talk about the Dust Bowl. We are going to revive some generational trauma for a lot of our fellow Midwesterners. I know my grandparents have talked about the Dust Bowl.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like everybody has some insane family stories about it.
Sure. I mean, yeah, my grandma definitely lived in the Dust Bowl era, though they were not in like the most affected part. They were in like, I want to say Pennsylvania. But yeah, I mean, it's crazy what went down during this time in American history.
There's a family story. I believe it's from my grandpa's side of the family because they were in South Dakota. And, you know, he was really young with his brother, and it was just them and his mom at home. And there was a horrible dust storm going on outside. And they heard the dog barking. And so the mom went out with like a lantern to the end of the driveway.
My God.
And there was a man.
Lantern.
There was a man clinging to their mailbox.
Because the winds were so strong, or
the winds were strong. You couldn't see anything.
Oh,
so I think he saw the light from the house, sort of, or just came across the mailbox and just stopped. His horse ran away, like he was alone.
Oh,
and he was like getting covered in dust. So she saved his life, brought him back to the house, and he ended up living with them for several years as like a farmhand.
Wow.
Yeah.
Damn. I mean, that's what it was like for a lot of folks.
Yep.
It was cuckoo bananas.
Soup's kooks. And we are going to get to it. But first, Amanda, please tell us what our wine crime pairing is for Dust Bowl crimes.
Well, you know, the Dust Bowl, I feel like, was kind of an era that overlapped with like the end of Prohibition. And so I was looking for some lesser known Dust Bowl era cocktails, because that was a thing. And there are a lot that were invented around that time that are still like incredibly pervasive today, like Bay Breezes, Salty Dogs, I think even Old Fashions. Like a lot of these classic cocktails are like from this era in the 30s, this like revival of booze being allowed again. But this one I had never heard of before, and it sounds freaking delicious. I'm a gin girly, so of course that's what I'm going to be drawn to. It's called the Maiden's Prayer.
Ooh, Maid Marian.
Maid Marian. And this is from midnightmixologist.com. This says, published in Savoy Cocktail Book from the 1930s, which is like a very famous cocktail book. Like basically every
classic.
Like a
handbook.
Yeah, every like classic cocktail that you'll see at a decent bar is probably from the Savoy Cocktail Book. This cocktail will make you rethink how you feel about gin if you don't think you like it. Refreshing and tasty, this cocktail owes its terrible name to the reason it is not more popular. Similar to Between the Sheets, it is a cocktail you can play with and make your own. Any London dry gin will work, and you can add bitters, lemon or orange, and different kinds of citrus juices, or change their ratio. So, another thing that I found before I go into the recipe when I was perusing cocktails from this era, so many of them are juice-based because Prohibition led to a lot of people making and circulating their own alcohol. A lot of it was like vodka, clear alcohols, and they tasted like shit.
And
so
gotta have those mixers.
Yeah, so juice was like the go-to mixer because it was the most effective at masking the flavor of the terrible booze that was like all they had access to.
That's fair. It was probably super high proof too. Like,
yeah.
Ugh.
So that's like kind of how the Salty Dog came to be, which is essentially vodka and grapefruit juice. As we know, grapefruit is like very good for blasting out scurvy, but also like blasting out the flavor. And then the salted rim, all of it was just to mask how terrible their booze was.
It does a good job at that.
So this calls for 1.5 ounces of London dry gin, a 1/2 ounce of Cointreau, which like you also can put in margaritas. It's like orange liqueur. I would go with Grand Marnier because she's my bitch. Like I love her. A 1/2 ounce of lemon juice and a 1/2 ounce of orange juice. So that lemon and orange are really going to like diffuse the kind of sharp hit of the gin.
Should we make these in a couple days when we see each other?
Yes, this would be delicious. And here's how you do it. In a shaker glass, shake over crushed ice and strain into chilled cocktail or martini glass. You serve this up, and then you garnish it with either a lemon twist or you can do an orange slice. And it sounds so delicious and so easy. Like this is a very, very, very easy cocktail to make. It's basically a gin Cosmo with like different different juice. Like it's as simple to make as that. So definitely get your hands on that. It's noon here, so I am not sipping a gin cocktail. I am sipping Polar Black Cherry Seltzer.
I got my ice water and a plate of chicken strips.
Oh my God, luck. We might need to take an ad break so that I can get some chicken strips.
Yeah.
Just
I got a plate. I have 4 different dipping sauces too.
Yum.
I'm a sauce bitch. I'm a saucy bitch.
Bill brought home this like amazing Japanese barbecue sauce the other day. I've been putting it on fucking everything. I should put that on chicken tendies today.
One of my sauces is a Melinda's brand peri-peri sauce. Very versatile. I thought it was kind of a hot sauce, but it's not really. It's very savory.
Oh my God, yum. Okay, well, cheers to your nuggies and your cocktails. And let's take a quick break to hear a word from Amanda's air fryer.
Yes.
Millions of Americans grind or clench their teeth at night, and most don't even know they're doing it. Okay, but one hint that you might be doing it is if you have jaw pain or headaches after a night's sleep. If that's happening to you, there's a high chance you grind or clench your teeth. And teeth grinding, also known as bruxism or TMJ, is generally caused by stress, which we have a lot of in abundance these days. And it can cause serious damage, such as eroding away your enamel and broken teeth, which leads to expensive dental bills. Don't do that to yourself.
No, this is a very simple thing that you can prevent. And that solution is to protect your teeth with a mouth guard. But mouth guards from the dentist can cost you like up to $800.
Blech.
We don't need that. The good news is there's Remy. Remy makes dental-grade professional quality mouth guards without the painful price tag. They're up to 80% cheaper than what you'd pay at a dentist. And you don't have to go to the dentist, which is perhaps the best part. So this is how it works. They send you an at-home impression kit to create molds of your teeth. You'll send those back to Remy, and then their dental team will make you a custom-fit mouth guard or guards and send them right back to you. Remy's guards are so comfortable to wear that most customers forget they're even wearing them. I can attest to that. I wear my Remy's every night because I don't want broken teeth.
No.
You just slide them on. They're custom. They're very thin. You're not aware that you're wearing them. Plus, they give you a 45-night satisfaction guarantee so you can try it risk-free, sleep better, and decide if it's the perfect fit. If not, Remy has got you covered.
Remy is for anyone dealing with nighttime grinding, clenching, or jaw pain who wants an affordable solution to protect their smile and say goodnight to jaw pain and headaches. Head to shopremy.com/gals and use code GALS to save up to 50%. That's 50% off at shopremi.com/gals with code GALS. Give your teeth a break without breaking the bank with Remy. And thank you, Remy, for sponsoring this episode.
One of the smartest apps you can have on your smartphone in 2025 is Upside. Upside gives you the power to earn more on the stuff you're already buying all the time. So whether you're filling up your tank with gas, going out to eat, or shopping for groceries, the Upside app lets you earn cash back on every purchase. Upside users are making as much as $280 a year.
Yeah, this Upside app is awesome. I personally love the map feature, so that especially if I'm somewhere that I don't usually visit, I can pull it up, and then that can help me base my decisions on like where I'm going to grab a bite to eat, where I'm going to grab some gas, so that I can get some money back. And you could maybe also search, look and see if places you're already going to might be connected with the Upside app, or make some adjustments to places you regularly shop that are in your area that are going to earn you cash back. It's like the easiest thing to use ever, and it's free. The free Upside app gets you cash back on daily essentials like gas, groceries, and dining. To get started, download the free Upside app, use our promo code GALS, and get an extra 25 cents back for every gallon on your first tank of gas. Next, claim an offer for whatever you're buying on Upside, then pay as usual with a credit or debit card, follow the steps in the app, and get paid, baby. There are over 100,000 gas stations, grocery stores, and restaurants on the Upside app, ensuring that cashback is always just around the corner. You can earn an average of 8% on restaurant and grocery purchases. Hello, that is a precious percentage. And the best part, you can even stack your Upside cashback on top of your credit and debit card rewards. Upside users are earning hundreds of dollars a year. That's probably why they have a 4.8-star rating on the App Store.
Download the free Upside app and use promo code GALS to get an extra 25 cents back for every gallon on your first tank of gas. That's an extra 25 cents back for every gallon on your first tank of gas using promo code GALS.
February's drawing to a close, and it is still chilly outside, so staying cozy indoors is definitely the move. Why not bring some essential skincare into that move? Whether binge watching or relaxing, the Illumina face mask fits perfectly into your routine. This Illumina face mask from iRestore is lightweight, it's breathable, it's comfortable. You might forget it's on. Plus, with a portable battery pack, you can glow up anywhere, on the couch, in bed, even in a blanket fort. I like to put it on when I'm vacuuming, so I feel like a full-blown robot. I have a robot face and a robot arm, and it's super fun. With the iRestore Illumina face mask, self-care is as easy as it gets. There's no complicated skincare routines, just results, baby. For a limited time, our listeners can save $205 off the iRestore face mask with code GALS25 at iRestoreLaser.com.
If you have never tried one of those cool futuristic-looking light masks before,
this is your call. This is your sign.
Missing. And you don't have to feel like you're taking such a huge risk because they offer a 12-month money-back guarantee, so you can gift it risk-free or keep it for yourself risk-free.
Yeah.
If your skin doesn't look healthier, you'll get a full refund, no awkward questions, just results or your money back. Me personally, I feel like the texture of my skin is like smoother and more even. It's helping with those dark spots. It's helping with these crow's feet, these forehead wrinkles.
Yeah, it's been a game changer for my acne.
Absolutely. There are 3 wavelengths for all of your skin's concerns. The red light and infrared light wavelength help with anti-aging and improve the blood flow to the skin. And the blue light has like anti-acne and blemish reducing effects. It's the only mask on the market that allows you to use all 3 modes at the same time. You're getting everything you could possibly want with a light mask with this Illumina face mask from iRestore.
So give your skin the love it deserves this February. For a limited time only, our listeners get $205 off their Illumina face mask with code GALS25 at iRestoreLaser.com. That's $205 off the Illumina face mask with code GALS25 at iRestoreLaser.com. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. Unlock your best skin with iRestore. All right, welcome back. Lucy, what is our background psych? Environmental impacts, crimes, storms, terror, new fears unlocked, doom, gloom, desperation for Dust Bowl crimes.
We got the doom, the gloom, the desperation.
We got the gloom.
The screenshots, the receipts, the timeline. We do have a timeline.
Oh, okay.
The doom, the gloom, the fucking timeline.
The desperation.
And I do have a little bit of psych, although I can't really explain it. Okay, we'll get to it. So the Dust Bowl is 2 things. It's both an area and an era.
Yep.
Centered around Amanda's public land strip, a.k.a. the Oklahoma Panhandle. That weird little strip that, like, no one really wanted for a long time.
Nobody wants that weird little strip.
No, well, good thing somebody owned it before this happened. The Dust Bowl as an area stretched from southern Nebraska down to central western Texas and from eastern Colorado to central Kansas. Obviously, this is not the extent of the areas affected by this environmental disaster, but this area experienced the majority of the soil erosion and therefore, like, where the storms started from. As an era, the Dust Bowl is a period from about 1930, 1932 to 1940 in the central southern plains, marked by severe drought that came in waves from 1934, 1935, and then 1939 to 1940. It was a really bad decade.
Yeah.
There were parts of the high plains that experienced drought conditions for as long as 8 years, which made what was already a bad farming situation much, much worse. And unfortunately, as you noted, it overlapped. Well, we talked about Prohibition. It also overlapped with the fucking Great Depression.
Yep. I mean, it was a huge contributor to the Great Depression.
Yes. Yes, for sure. So this was
which,
a time,
like, obviously was already in place It's like this
The
weird
dominoes
thing.
were set up for us to have a real bad time.
The dominoes were set up, and also it was like a snake eating its own tail, kind of, because it's like the Great Depression, and then that like kicked farm work and that kind of labor for survival into high gear, and then like overtilling of this region where like the majority of our crops were being grown led to like the fall of these farms, and then everybody migrating to find other work. And it was just like, it was such a fucking desperate time. And I feel like we're careening toward it again right now as we speak, and everything is dust.
Everything is dust, baby. That's the moral of this story. So, very difficult time. There was also a lot of really decisive work by FDR and the federal government, which I kind of want to highlight because of what's happening now, just as a reminder of why the government exists in the first place. Like all this good that it can do, and exactly the kind of things that we won't have access to anymore now that it's being completely dismantled. Also, to clarify, the high plains that doesn't mean the northern plains. It refers to the western Great Plains, and it's kind of because like the elevation of that area is rising up the further west you go until you get to the Rockies. So this area is semi-arid, experiences very high winds, very big temperature swings, and not a lot of rainfall, even in a normal year. So when this place gets dry, it gets really, really,
Really dry.
really fucking dry. Dramatically, intensely, detrimentally dry. Okay, so here's how all of this came about. In 1862, the federal government, as we discussed in Oklahoma Crimes recently, encouraged settlement and development of the plains for agriculture with the aptly named Homestead Act of 1862. So you have this influx of people into a semi-arid land area that, like I said, receives like under 20 inches of rainfall a year. And to make matters worse, there was an unusually wet period of time, gross, when they were all coming out there. So everyone was like, oh, the rain follows the plow, which was a popular phrase among real estate promoters. So that meant like, basically, if you build it, they will come. If you cultivate the land, the climate will change to support it, which is really fucking stupid. Very propaganda.
Yeah.
But it was the way that they were selling land in this very dry area. They're like, yeah, if you plow it deep enough, that's where the moisture is.
Yep.
So they decimated all of the native grasses, which is what, if anyone had asked or listened to the native indigenous people who were living on this area, you can't just fucking do that. You can't just do that.
No.
To your point, also, there was a dramatic and rapid mechanization of farm equipment during this time, which allowed for greater conversion of these native grasslands to farmlands. Turns out, shocker, the climate did not, in fact, change to suit the farmers' cultivation efforts.
You don't say.
And with the huge swaths of said native drought-resistant prairie grasses that were there to root the soil in place, this entire region became prone to huge dust storms that would lift the topsoil up into the air in these massive black rolling walls.
Yeah,
and
the
blow
photos of those
hundreds of miles
are very fucking scary.
I'm not going to lie. It reactivated my wind trauma a little bit. A lot of these
fair.
stories.
That's very fair.
Yeah. So quick shout out to TikTok user APTKR_. So I listen to like longer TikToks while I'm in the shower in the morning.
Yep.
And theirs popped up and it was about the fucking Dust Bowl.
Wow.
It's like, our phones are listening. I listened to the whole damn thing. It's like 8 minutes long. But it's basically a review of the book called The Worst Hard Time by New York Times journalist Timothy Egan. I have got to get my hands on this book. It sounds so scary.
And fascinating.
Historical nonfiction.
Yeah, that's your jam.
That's my beach read.
Yeah.
So what happened in the plains was really, really, really fucking bad. It was way worse than we were ever taught it was. At the time, it was considered like apocalyptic, like biblical to the point where people in the big cities and on the coasts heard reports of what was going on in the Dust Bowl and were like, that's obviously made up. That's not happening.
Oh, wow. Like, people just refused to believe it?
No one believed it. And because, like, the federal government being run in Washington, D.C., it took a minute for them to start making legislation that would address this issue because a lot of people just did not believe the severity of what was happening.
Oh, dang.
So finally one day in 1935, so these storms started in 1930-ish, 1932. Took till 1935 when dust from the plains coated big East Coast cities as far away as New York and D.C.
And then they were like, oh, okay, it's real.
Exactly. So that's like 1,200-ish miles.
That shit traveled.
That shit's traveled. And I also read that ships as far as 200 miles off the fucking coast were getting hit by the dust as well.
What the fuck?
It was just getting fucking carried.
That's
so far.
Really scary.
Yeah. So the East Coast, these bigger cities getting hit by the dust storms lasted for 4 days. So it really was like, we're not fucking around. Like, this is a very serious thing. So they're finally like, okay, I guess it's pretty bad. What can we do about it? And we'll kind of get to that when we talk about like actual legislation and Congress and stuff.
Okay.
So here's a little bit of a timeline. In 1930, the first dust storm is recorded. It's viewed as an anomaly at the time because it was a completely new phenomenon. They're like, oh, that's weird. Well,
that'll probably never happen again.
Yeah. In 1931.
Got to like a decade-long period of this hell.
That was weird.
That was weird. Oh, a wildfire in California? That probably won't happen again.
In November? How odd. Well, okay, 1931, severe drought kills a ton of crops in the central and southern plains. And so thus begin the black blizzards as the topsoil is being lifted up by high winds. Because now the drought kills the crops. There's no more crops. You just have naked, empty ground.
Yeah. I read about some of these. Really, really nightmarish.
Yeah. We'll get to the nightmares. In 1932, the number of dust storms increased to 14. And by 1933, there were 38. So they are multiplying rapidly.
Ugh.
So I just want to paint a little bit of a picture. This shit was gnarly, nuts, insane.
Yep.
Unlike a sandstorm, which would be like reddish or tan in color, these were the color of pitch, aka topsoil, so black.
Dark, yeah.
They rolled across the ground. Inside one of these storms, visibility dropped to the point where you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. It was like
what
max
the fuck?
a foot, maybe.
Oh my God.
Also, like, you shouldn't be opening your eyes either.
No.
This, I think, is I can't say favorite, but I think the most fascinating part. These storms, okay, so it's all this dirt rubbing around, hitting each other, causing friction, causing static electricity. These storms generated so much static electricity that it could short circuit a car, making the car undrivable. Also, if you made skin-to-skin contact with someone, the shock could be so bad it could knock you out.
What?
Barbed wires would glow blue because of the electrical current running through the metal.
What? That was like from the air?
From the air.
No.
The static currents within the storms in the air was electrifying everything.
No.
So like fruits and vegetables on the vines, like in the example in that TikTok, it was watermelons. And by the TikTok, I think I mean the book. The electricity would travel like down the vines and just roast the fruits, killing the plants and just like roasting the vegetables or the fruits because of the static.
Okay, this is only going to land with like a handful of fucking dorks that are listening to this. Okay. But I have been playing, finally, I know this game has been out for a long time, but I've been playing the Zelda Breath of the Wild on the Switch. It's such a great game. 10 out of 10, do recommend. But like, this reminds me, there are areas where you can like get struck by lightning during these wild storms, and there are like lightning weapons and lightning like abilities that you can unlock in the game or encounter in the game. And like, that will happen. Like, lightning will strike, and then all these like fruits and vegetables that might be in the area are like cooked. And I just keep picturing me existing within like the rules of this video game.
Yeah.
But this was happening in a giant dirt cloud, an electric dirt cloud.
So if you did have any vegetation still on your farm, it could
was
very easily
literally
just be
cooked.
taken out by electricity. It's the storm dirt generated electricity.
Can you imagine like so many farmers that didn't flee?
Two thirds of them couldn't go anywhere.
And they would stay and try to protect their farms from like people that were essentially pillaging them to survive. And so you're already like kind of at odds with your neighbors because like land disputes and livestock theft and like all this shit was rampant because everybody was so desperate. And then this giant storm can come through and everything that you have worked hard and like literally blood, sweat, and tears to protect could be wiped out by something that you can't do anything about.
In seconds.
Okay.
Because these storms could roll in at 50 miles an hour and block out the sun. Like you might not even see it coming.
Wow.
In addition to the dust storms that they call dusters, and like I said, this was like a biblical, like people were like, oh my God, we're living in the end times. There were also swarms of pests. So grasshoppers, the jackrabbits, and grasshoppers, they ate everything that could possibly be eaten. But also bugs such as black widow spiders, centipedes, and tarantulas would infest homes because there was nowhere else for the bugs to go. So people were dying from spider bites because they couldn't keep the fucking spiders out of their houses.
No. No.
Speaking of houses, entire homes would be buried in dirt to the point where you could only see the chimneys.
Holy shit.
Invasive tumbleweeds would like tumble and link up together and create structures for the dirt to pile up on. So that would form these huge dunes, and they could be as tall as like 40 feet.
No.
Which was another reason why people couldn't like leave. There would just be like...
You physically are trapped.
Physically, yeah. Your car won't work because of the electricity.
Yep. You're buried under a pile of dirt.
There are no roads anymore, and you don't have any food. Where are you going to go? It's the Great Depression. There's a 25% unemployment rate in the cities. So you're just going to pack everyone up and go to a city and have a real high chance of starving there instead of at your home? What are you going to do?
And basically, we'll talk about this a little bit in my case, but like your chances of migrating and getting work are slim anyway, and really only achievable if you are white. And so a lot of fucking people died or literally were killed by white folks who didn't want like black and brown people to come to their city and get their jobs, basically.
It's a resource competition. People wore masks that looked like they belonged in the trenches of World War I to protect their lungs and eyes. I have some pictures. See, there's a picture of those 3 little children. And they're all wearing
that picture is like iconic.
Yeah. They're wearing goggles. They look like aviation goggles with towels wrapped around their noses and mouth. They've got hats on. Yeah.
Yeah, with their school books and lunch pails.
Yep. Lunch pails that are probably like taped shut to keep the dirt out of that off your food.
Yeah, I mean, how do you even prepare food when there's dirt coming through like every crack of your home? I mean, it reminds me of like the opening act of Interstellar, where they're essentially in a new Dust Bowl, and that's why they have like an off-planet agricultural center, and none of these farmers can fucking sustain. All they can grow is corn.
I think there's a movie it's called Breathe that came out not too long ago, but it's like the Dust Bowl, but if the dust was like
poison,
more like poisonous, yeah. And the kids
Which
are like,
a lot of this like essentially was. It wouldn't like immediately kill you, but I would imagine that the statistics, like the health stats during and in the years after the Dust Bowl, were wild, especially if you were breathing this shit in every minute of every day. I mean, you can't even just like, we have air advisories in the United States all the time that recommend that you like stay indoors if you're going to go outside to wear a mask. But like there was no escaping this. Like it's in your fucking house.
Mm-hmm. And I also couldn't find any like hard stats about how many people died because of this, because of the ways that people died were so all over the place.
Yeah.
I mean, it could have been a car accident because your car got tipped over by the wind.
I did find
or you drowned in dust or whatever.
An interesting article that I almost covered, but then decided not to. But it was a study about the boom of serial killers in the 70s, like all being child products of the Dust Bowl era, and like how that shaped their mental health. I'm like,
oh, that's cool.
Yeah, because that was like one of the biggest times in America for serial killers was the 70s, and they would be reaching like their 20s as Dust Bowl babies. It was so weird.
I've heard a few different theories on why there were so many serial killers in the 70s. And I think it might just be a combination of a lot of different things.
There's never any one factor that puts you on that path. It's always a multitude of things. But I hadn't ever seen like the Dust Bowl specific era being
me neither.
referenced. So I thought that article was interesting.
Yeah. So people would hang wet sheets in their house to trap the dust, and they wore wet cloths over their mouths. To protect their fields, if they could grow anything at all, they sprayed them with cyanide. That was to kill the rabbits that were eating their plants. And I think they knew that cyanide was not good for people, but I think it was sort of like, well,
the lesser of two evils.
Lesser of two evils. Either we don't have food or we have food that could make us sick.
Yeah, we can eat a little bit of poison. At least we're eating.
Yeah. Just rinse it off. Oh, wait, we don't have water.
Oh. And can you imagine trying to like breathe through a wet cloth?
Yeah. That's like what waterboarding is.
Yeah. Listen.
I mean, it's not, but.
I am not strong enough. I would have been dead in 48 hours.
Yep.
Bye.
Also, to control the rabbits, organized community picnics would culminate in bloody clubbing sprees.
Hell yeah.
Called rabbit drives, where they just kill all the rabbits and let them rot, I guess.
Oh, they probably ate some of them too.
Yeah, I'm sure. But
just like
not if they were eating cyanide.
No.
Cyanide crops, but yeah. Okay, so that's the first kind of 3 years of things. In 1933, FDR declares a bank holiday so Congress can pass the Emergency Banking Act of 1933 to stabilize the banking industry with the government's backing. The Emergency Farm Mortgage Act allocates a couple $100 million to help farmers facing foreclosure, and the decision is made to slaughter roughly 6 million pigs in order to stabilize prices. So at this point, they're thinking mostly about the market. But they killed all of these pigs. Most of that meat went to waste. And again, it's the Great Depression, so people got really pissed. Like, they're starving. Like, what are you doing? You're trying to stabilize the price of pork?
Yeah.
By killing all of these pigs to basically take them off the market. But just because you can't sell it doesn't mean that people shouldn't have the meat to fucking survive.
Right. That's capitalism for you, though.
Well, yeah, but so now the feds are like, ooh, okay, that was bad. So to kind of make up for this, the government created the Federal Surplus Relief Corporation, or the FSRC, which diverted agricultural commodities to relief organizations. So things like apples, canned beef, flour, and like some cotton goods were then distributed through local relief organizations.
To not be like, if we have an abundance and we can't profit off of it, we'll just murder it.
Right.
How about, no, we reallocate it to people who fucking need it? How about that?
Yeah. Yep. In the San Joaquin Valley, California, where many farmers fleeing the drought had gone and were now seeking migrant farm work, there is the largest agricultural strike in American history. More than 18,000 cotton workers with the Cannery and Agricultural Workers Union went on strike for 24 days. In the protests, the ensuing protests, 2 men and 1 woman were killed. Hundreds were injured. And in the settlement, the growers recognized the union and the workers were given a 25% raise.
This was a really rough situation too, because like there wasn't just dissent from the top that obviously didn't want the workers to stop working, but like the workers were also desperate to work. They weren't getting paid while they were striking. And so like, of course, they wanted fair wages and they wanted better compensation and they wanted better protections, but that they had to sacrifice a lot to be able to achieve that. That's what capitalism does. It puts you in this impossible position where like the only way to send the message is to stop the means of production. But when the means of production is your livelihood and you have you're starving, your family is starving, and you're one of the lucky few who have a job, it would be hard to convince these people to strike, even if it is like the best plan of action. That's not an easy decision to make. And I mean, you hate like, what is it, a scab or whatever the fuck they're called? Yeah. That's fair. But like, you also have to see the nuance in these situations and take into account that many of these people like could not afford almost a month of not working. Many of us can't. I couldn't go without a paycheck for a month. I'd lose my house.
No, and then we're talking now today about like general strikes and, you know, days where you don't spend any money at all to.
And if you have the means to do that, yes, like powerful people who can do that should be doing it. But we can't like come down on people who can't afford to do that.
There is a lot of power in those kinds of demonstrations, obviously. But I think as we personally are going to see more and more over the next few years, it is difficult to do that and to make such a drastic move for yourself personally that could have major effects based on like your ideology and morals alone. It is really hard.
It can be hard. And, you know, people with the means to be able to strike can also engage in community building where you could like sponsor somebody else being able to strike who would otherwise not be able to, because like a lot of impact could be made by quote unquote blue collar workers, like the everyday workforce striking, because so much would come to a halt. But those are the very people who
would be the most affected.
Who would be the most affected and truly survive day to day, paycheck to paycheck, who would really have a hard time being able to do that. And that's where like mutual aid and community building, where people with more abundant resources could support an act like that by making sure that families who are choosing to strike can still put food on the table for their kids and themselves while also making that kind of impact. So just stuff to think about.
I love that. I never even thought about like sponsoring someone to strike. Because like, well, if we strike, the fuck are we striking for?
Right.
Just, okay. You know?
Yeah. And I mean, we can boycott. We can, you know, us striking as a indie podcast is like not the same as like a farm workers strike. But we could sponsor that so that, you know, like those are creative ways that you can work in community to help these things have an impact. Yeah. But yeah, I was reading a little bit about this strike in particular, because I was thinking of going in that direction today too and didn't. And I just really felt for the striking workers that must have really struggled to come to this decision and to make it that long.
And considering how tenuous their security is as a migrant farm worker in the first place, yeah. I wanted to devote more to that particular strike, but I think we could easily have a whole season of episodes on farm worker strikes in the future. So hopefully we'll come back to that.
And a great Instagram account that you can follow is Flowers in Spanish, and it focuses on immigrant farmhand and farm worker life and support. Like, that would be a very important place to get information and to support their work. Certainly right now as we're engaging in the current political climate. So just thought I would drop that in there.
Flowers in Spanish.
Oh, sorry, it's flower in Spanish, not S. Flower in Spanish.
Got it. In 1934, huge dust storms spread out from the Dust Bowl. The most severe drought in U.S. history is fully underway at this point, and it's covering more than 75% of the country, with 27 states in the severely affected category.
Severely.
Yeah.
Half the states.
I have a map of it, which it's just like the whole middle of the country, just top to bottom is just red. The 1934 Yearbook of Agriculture states, quote, approximately 35 million acres of formerly cultivated land has essentially been destroyed for crop production. 100 million acres now in crops have lost all or most of the topsoil, and 125 million acres of land now in crops are rapidly losing topsoil. So shit was already bad, definitely getting worse. People were going blind from all the dirt getting into their eye sockets over time. New medical diagnoses came out of this period, such as dust pneumonia. And that's when your esophagus and your lungs just fill up with dirt. You could die within a couple days.
Yeah, you suffocate, essentially, from the inside out.
Yep. This was particularly bad for children and elderly folks. People also went mad. So there are reports of particularly women, which I didn't know, like walking around in circles talking to themselves. And they called this dust madness.
Oh, that gave me chills.
I don't really know what the deal was with that. It was probably just stress, trauma, etc.
I imagine this affecting a lot of women because women were in the home caring for the families through this awful situation. So it's like cabin fever. I mean, they're trapped inside. Their husbands and sons are out in the fields getting sick, dying.
Or a lot
Their
of
children are
husbands
dying.
and sons didn't
Left.
come home from World War I.
Yep. Or left to find work elsewhere and tried to send money back home. So they're alone where they can't really go outside much because they can't fucking breathe the air. Like, I think any of us would go a little cuckoo.
We'll get to the women, too, in a little bit. Like we were talking about before, most people could not leave. Fewer than a third actually did leave to go, presumably, west.
Which is wild because
don't go east.
Considering the fact that most people couldn't leave, it was still one of, like, the largest migrations in American history.
If not the largest.
Yeah. So... a lot of people did leave, but like percentage-wise, it wasn't the majority of that region.
So not only were people very, very, very poor because, again, Great Depression, but they physically, maybe they couldn't see to drive, or the roads would be completely impassable from these huge dirt dunes. Dusters also derailed trains. Like, it was completely devastating. In 1935, the federal government forms the Drought Relief Service and begins to buy farm animals from ranchers. So while there are accounts of people being really upset to lose their herd, which, especially if it's a smaller farm and it's like, oh, my dairy cow, Bessie, who we've had for 10 years.
Birthed and raised from a baby cow.
Yeah, and it's not even just the emotional connection to the animals. It's just like, that's kind of your source for hope.
And it's been like
survival.
Sustaining your family. Yeah.
But a lot of these animals were really, really sick. They'd have sores. They were blind. They were dying of thirst. This action is credited with saving many, many farms from bankruptcy. So like I said, since a lot of the animals were not in great shape, farmers were paid $1 for the sick ones that were just kind of shot on site and $5 for the ones that could go to slaughter. And then the meat was then distributed through the FSRC, the equitable distribution thing. I'm sure it wasn't equitable, but you know what I mean. FDR approves the Emergency Relief Appropriation Act in 1935 as well, and authorizes the creation of the Works Progress Administration, which employs 8.5 million people. We all remember this from American government, FDR's New Deal, Works Progress Administration. You know.
Yeah, we all remember this.
WPA? Whatever.
We all paid close attention.
Then comes April 14th, 1935. The worst of the black blizzards of the Dust Bowl occurs, and this is one of the worst dust storms in American history with incalculable economic and agricultural damage. So what happened was a cold front was moving like southeast across the plains. That meant rapidly falling temperatures and very high winds. That's what happened with the derecho. So this cold front just dropped, the atmospheric drop pushes out this huge wave of wind, gust of wind. It's estimated that 300,000 tons of topsoil is displaced from this one storm.
An unfathomable amount of dirt in the air. And the photos of these storms.
I got photos too. I know you've seen them, but like they're
so scary. Like imagine seeing that coming toward your fucking house. And there's nothing you can do and you can't flee because your car is fucked up.
And even if you're in your house, it's gonna hit you. The most you could do is go down to a basement if you have one. Cover yourself up with your wet blankets if that's available to you, if you have enough time.
If you have water.
Yeah. So the storm first hits Amanda's public land strip, the Oklahoma Panhandle.
My panhandle.
Your panhandle. You're a manhandle.
My manhandle.
Before moving south, it hits Beaver, Oklahoma at 4 p.m. At this point, the cloud of dust was estimated to be 500 to 600 feet high, which would be over 40 stories high.
No.
And moving at 50 to 60 miles an hour.
Okay. So
it's a 40-story building coming at you at the same speed as you drive on the highway.
Yep.
So once it was overhead, there was pitch darkness. People reported that it was darker than night. Some observers reported seeing hundreds and hundreds of birds flying in front of the dust cloud because they were trying to like get away from it.
Oh, a bird can't fly at 60 miles an hour for the most part, and certainly not for very long. So like they're getting sucked into that fucker too.
And then after the storm passed, there were just dead birds everywhere.
Oh, God.
This is a quote from the Weather Bureau logs. The onrushing cloud, the darkness, and the thick, choking dirt made this storm one of terror and the worst, while it lasted, ever known here. So yeah, it was really bad.
Yeah.
2 weeks later, Congress declares soil erosion a national menace in an act creating the Soil Conservation Service, which is a division of the Department of Agriculture, and that is still the only thing that exists from FDR's New Deal.
Dang.
For now. I haven't checked the news yet today, so who knows if it's still around. Ugh. By the end of the year, a group of experts concluded that 850 million tons of topsoil had been blown off the southern plains.
My God. Yeah, like you said, irreparable.
Incalculable.
Damage.
Yeah. Oh.
And like a lot of this has come back to being fertile, but there are certainly still areas that are not.
We're not going to get the native grasses back.
No.
The way that they were naturally before we fucking got here. There's no way. There's no fucking way. In 1937, FDR addresses the nation for his second inaugural address, saying, quote, "I see 1/3 of the nation ill-housed, ill-clad, ill-nourished. The test of our progress is not whether we add more to the abundance of those who have much. It is whether we provide enough for those who have too little. We will go to the moon."
Yeah, we choose to go to the moon. Different president, same sentiment.
But also, like, applicable now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Big time.
Abundance with a capital A. Jesus. FDR's Shelter Belt program begins in 1937 with the aim of large-scale tree planting across the plains in a 100-mile wide zone from Canada to northern Texas in order to prevent erosion. So this is met with some success, but of course runs into some funding issues. In 1938, the extensive work replowing the land into furrows, planting trees in shelter belts, and other conservation methods has resulted in a 65% reduction in the amount of soil blowing. So it is working.
It's working.
But the drought is still happening.
They need rain.
Finally, in 1939, sweet, sweet rain falls.
Oof.
However, by 1940, 2.5 million people had left the plains. And like you said, it is one of, if not the largest migration in American history. I just wanted to finish this out with some accounts and quotes about the Dust Bowl, like from people who lived there during it. So this is from Imogene Glover from Guyman, Oklahoma. She says, While I was in school, we had an old building that was 2 stories, and the teachers would tell us when the dust storms were rolling in to go to the hall and get under the stairs, so if the building blew away or blew down, we would be protected by the stairway.
It's like a tornado drill.
Yep. This is how we went to school. So we slept pretty good at night, but once in a while, it'd go all day and all night and maybe blow for a week before it really was no dust storm.
My God.
And of course, our parents had to turn the plates upside down on the tables and cover them with a sheet or whatever. And we slept with the babies, especially, they slept with wet sheets over their cribs so they wouldn't breathe in all that dirt.
Yeah, that's wild.
One time I didn't quite get back to the cellar before the dirt hit. And I can remember that it burned the wind and the gravel. It felt like it burned my legs. You know, it was hitting so hard on my legs before I could get into the cellar. But we always went to the cellar when there was a bad one coming. And then here's one. It's a quote from Robert Boots McCoy in the Ken Burns documentary, The Dust Bowl.
I want to watch this.
Yeah, I want to watch anything by Ken Burns.
I know. I love a Ken Burns Zoom.
So it says, it isn't Robert's description of the black blizzard itself that hits home. So Robert had said, quote, it was just like midnight in the middle of the day, just like midnight with no stars. So it wasn't just the description, but the vignette with which he wraps up the experience of having a mountain range worth of earth envelop everything around him.
Wow.
Quote, mother would pray about it, you know, and us kids, we were little and we stayed pretty close to Ma, I can guarantee you. No fact or artifact could make the storm any more visible, any more real for the viewer than the act of sympathetic imagination that it takes to conjure an image of this mustachioed older gentleman as little kid, huddling against his praying mom as the dark dirt blasted their home.
Yeah, and I'm sure many people lost their homes entirely.
Oh, yeah.
From storms like this.
Oh,
Because,
yeah.
all that rock, all that rocky soil,
And just the
pelting
wind.
for days at a time.
Mm-hmm. Patty Muller describes having to shut all of the windows during a scorching, dry Kansas summer. And so, yeah, they have to have all their fucking windows shut.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, you can't have airflow when the air is dust.
Yeah. And still having fine dust still coming in and covering all the surfaces. With so many displaced workers, she also recalled having to open up the bedrooms of the house to migrant workers in order to make ends meet. And she and her siblings sleeping in the basement. They would use a wet bed sheet and a fan to try to cool the air down. They were just sleeping in the basement with their wet sheets.
Yeah.
Because they had to rent their rooms out to people to make a little bit of money. So last source I want to shout out is from the University of Oklahoma. They have an oral history project called Dust, Drought, and Dreams Gone Dry, Oklahoma Women in the Dust Bowl. So these are stories from the women's perspectives because a lot of the stories, as always, have come from men who themselves say it was the women who helped hold the families and farms together. So this is from this post. The women interviewed share accounts of everything from canning and home remedies, square dances and weddings, hobos, gypsies and bootleggers, to Black Sunday, rabbit drives, the killing of their cattle, and full details of coping with dust from what has been called the worst natural disaster ever. The website seeks to preserve these firsthand accounts and make them accessible to scholars, researchers, and anyone interested in this history. And you can find that at library.okstate.edu. Fuck.
We're going to get to the hobos.
I can't wait.
And obviously flagging that, like, we don't use the term gypsies anymore, but that was a quote from a time when travelers were referred to in that way.
Yes.
So, yeah, just before the emails come in.
That was a quote from the website. You could email the University of Oklahoma if you feel so compelled. Yeah, but this dust, the electricity thing just...
That blows my mind. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. Who would?
What the fuck?
Anyway, I need a fucking break, so let's take a quick break to hear a word from our sponsors.
Let's do it.
With HelloFresh, you get farm-fresh, pre-portioned ingredients and seasonal recipes delivered right to your doorstep. Skip trips to the grocery store and count on HelloFresh to make home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. That's why it's America's #1 meal kit. Also, Green Chef and Every Plate are now also owned by HelloFresh, and with a wider array of meal plans to choose from, there's just something for everyone. I like to be able to switch between the brands, and now our listeners can enjoy both brands at a discount on us.
I am in love with these meal kits, okay? I cannot meal plan. I get so fatigued figuring out what's for dinner night after night, especially when you're busy, especially when you're tired, especially when you're not thinking about it until you're already hungry. And then there I go again. I'm reaching for a delivery app and I'm spending way too much money on food that is definitely not nearly as good for my body and my mind and my spirit as it would be if I were just making it fresh in my own house. And it is so easy to find time to eat well with 50 wholesome, hassle-free meals to choose from each week delivered to your door. I recently made and have now recreated like 2 or 3 times this like pork tenderloin with a mustard and dill and sour cream sauce.
Yep, with like the Yukon Gold taters.
Oh, with some mashed potatoes on the side, some roasted green beans, like something I never would have thought of for myself, but I whipped up in half an hour, and my husband is like, oh my God, is Bobby Flay in the room with us? What is going on? It's so good. I could drink that sauce. I'm obsessed with it. And HelloFresh's new ready-made meals go from the fridge to your fork in just 3 minutes. So if you truly are not here for the actual cooking, the prep, they've got you covered too. It's the same high-quality ingredients and restaurant-worthy flavor that you expect from HelloFresh, just with none of the work. So pepper those in there too. Give yourself a little treat.
Get up to 10 free meals and a free high-protein item for life at HelloFresh.com/HelloFreshPodcast. 1 item per box with active subscription. Free meals applied as discount on the first box. New subscribers only, varies by plan. That's up to 10 free HelloFresh meals. Just go to HelloFresh.com/HelloFreshPodcast.
Shopping can be the worst. The lighting is bad. It's always too hot in there. I need more space. I want to spread all my stuff out. I want to like really take my time planning my outfits without like an employee or a line breathing down my neck. I just can't get over the anxiety of actually shopping in person. And I'm here to tell you, there's a better way, okay? Stitch Fix online personal styling makes it so easy. Even when I can figure out my size in a store, they often don't seem to have it. They don't have it in stock. Everything is just the worst, but with Stitch Fix, you get a stylist who understands your style, your size, and your budget, and they do all the shopping for you.
I've said it before, it's worth repeating. The only pairs of jeans that I will wear, I have gotten from Stitch Fix.
Correct. Preach.
I just know.
I've had them for years.
They just know.
They know.
Shopping and figuring out your style can be really overwhelming, especially when you wear almost exclusively black and grays. Me. Hi, it's me. When it comes to getting dressed, I don't even know where to start if I want to look like cute and put together. That's why I love having a Stitch Fix stylist. They really know what works for me, the jeans.
Oh.
So I get pieces that make me look great. It's very much a confidence boost. So here's how it works. You just give your stylist your size, style, budget preferences. I order boxes whenever I want, however I want. They don't require a subscription, but if that's something you're into, by all means, it's very customizable. And my stylist sends just for me pieces, plus outfit recommendations and styling tips. Sometimes they send a pair of shoes or some jewelry or like a bag. So you just keep what you love and send back the rest. It is incredibly easy. My stylist sends personalized pieces and the fit is flawless. I don't know how they do it.
Truly.
But they do it. It's like having my own personal style support person. And like Amanda said, no stores, no crowds, no parking, no gross lighting, no stress. Just personalized looks that you'll love. Stitch Fix makes it all so easy.
Personal styling for everyone, okay? Get started today at stitchfix.com/wineandcrime. That's stitchfix.com/wineandcrime.
I love my cats. Amanda loves her cats.
My God, I love my cats.
Everyone who has a cat loves their cat. And what's not to love about them? The companionship, the affection, even their independence and your security in the knowledge that you are one of the few people that they can tolerate. Maybe even love. Maybe even sleep on your head at night.
Oh.
So cats are so magical, but the worst part is dealing with their litter boxes. We love them, we want the best for them, but man, those can get gross.
Real gross.
So we're here to say today, stop scooping poop and upgrade your litter box situation with Litter Robot by Whisker.
This has changed our lives.
Yup.
I also, my litter box is not far from my office. It's right in our laundry room. It's in a pretty high traffic area for me and my husband. You can't really go a day without walking by it. And that was becoming kind of a gross activity. And since we switched to Litter Robot, I swear the transition was so easy. Like, we kept their previous litter box next to it so that if they weren't feeling it, then they would have the other option. They never looked back. They immediately started using it the day we set it up. And they are so bougie now, they will like not even touch the other litter box, the backup litter box. Litter Robot by Whisker is literally the solution to all of your litter box problems. Their self-cleaning technology automatically cleans after every single use, so your cats will always have a fresh bed of litter to do their business, and you and your friends won't think your house smells like a litter box. Even people who are really good at keeping up with their litter box maintenance, you can't camp out by the litter box all day and scoop every time they walk into it. But you know who can? Litter Robot, baby. Litter Robot will then send you a notification to your phone, letting you know that your cat just used it. With us, we have 2 different cats. They know their different weights. They'll be like, oh, Beans is using the litter box. Pepperoni's using the litter box. Oh, it needs to be emptied. It gives you data and insights to stay on top of your cat's health. Here's how heavy Beans is this week. Oh my God, I can't believe how much information they send you. And Litter Robot is perfect for the gift-giving season, making it the perfect time to join over 1 million happy pets and pet parents who have upgraded to Litter Robot. I'm telling you right now, this is like the greatest investment you can make as a cat parent. You will not regret it.
As a special offer to listeners of this show, go to stopscooping.com/gals and use promo code gals to save an additional $50 on any Litter Robot bundle. That's $50 off any Litter Robot bundle at stopscooping.com/gals and use promo code gals. Stopscooping.com/gals, promo code gals.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about, it's kind of meandering as I am. So I'm just going to dive in. Obviously, I was looking into crime during the Dust Bowl era. Mm-hmm. And there certainly was crime. I kind of put it in heavy quotes, like a rise in crime, because it was largely driven by economic desperation and social upheaval.
Survival crime.
Yeah, just like most crime as we know it today. Desperate, poor, marginalized people are often criminalized for acts of survival, and the combination of severe drought, dust storms, and the Great Depression led to widespread poverty, displacement, and in an obvious response to those conditions, criminal activity, quote unquote. Mm-hmm. Some of the most prolific crimes of the era were theft and burglary. A lot of families were struggling to survive, so like theft, especially of food, livestock, and farming equipment was pretty common. Some displaced farmers known as Okies and Arkies, many of whom were from Oklahoma and Arkansas, which was like, as you know from your map, a heavily affected area by the Dust Bowl. They were forced to steal just to eat. Train and roadside robberies increased as people tried to move west. And like, we hadn't really seen a lot of train robberies since the Wild West because like, it just wasn't as much of a thing.
I think the trains kind of went faster too. It wasn't as easy to just like,
but trains were targeted if they had freight containing like valuable produce or food products, or even like payroll. There were trains that had gold going to California to pay the farmers. Oh. And some of these were hijacked and pillaged essentially so that people could fucking pay to live and eat. Vigilantisms, I kind of mentioned earlier, farmers would oftentimes stay behind and like they had to take the law into their own hands to protect their land, protect their livestock. There were definitely armed confrontations between landowners and desperate migrant workers. In California, local authorities and citizens sometimes violently turned away Dust Bowl refugees, seeing them as a burden. We'll get to that a little bit more in a minute here. There were some instances of murder and unsolved disappearances, but it was like hard to lock in on anything specific because so many people were moving and so many people lacked really strong community ties because like migrant work was so prevalent at the time that people going missing or people being murdered often would go unsolved. It's like, I haven't seen that guy in a while. Who's
going to report you missing, really?
Right.
And to whom?
Right. I haven't seen that guy in a while, but he was like train hopping to try and find work. He could be anywhere. I don't know. Desperate individuals sometimes killed for resources or out of hopelessness. Unidentified bodies were occasionally found along railroad tracks, in labor camps, or even buried in abandoned farmland. There was certainly exploitation of migrant workers. Many migrants faced exploitation by farm owners who paid them meager wages and forced them to live in terrible conditions, part of what sparked that strike in California. Some were effectively trapped in cycles of debt and abuse, unable to leave brutal working environments.
Oh, it's almost like that's not woven into the fabric of American history.
Yeah. I could have gone down a road of a lot of like gangster crime, but I feel like we've covered some of those to death. But like bank robberies and notorious criminals were a big thing during the Depression, and the Dust Bowl was a big part of that. The era coincided with the rise of famous bank robbers and gangsters such as Bonnie and Clyde, John Dillinger, and Pretty Boy Floyd. These criminals were often seen as folk heroes as they robbed banks that many blamed for their financial ruin.
Yeah, Great Depression.
And there was a prevalence of corruption and police brutality. Local law enforcement in some areas abused their power, targeting migrants with arbitrary arrests, forced evictions, physical violence, and sometimes just shooting them on sight.
Oh, good.
Police often worked with wealthy landowners to suppress labor organizing among migrant workers. Yeah, all of it's ringing true.
Yeah.
And as in all events of American history, we see a lot of whiteness, white people at the center of education around the Dust Bowl. Like so many of these iconic photos that we have access to, it's like it's all these white farm families.
That lady just like looking into the distance with her dirty little kids.
Yeah, that forlorn woman. And it's just important to remember that literally everyone was affected by this, but the ramifications for Black Americans around this time were particularly brutal due to racism. Midwesterners were migrating in droves to the North and the West in search of jobs and fertile land. And this obviously included Black Americans who were met with vitriol from their white neighbors who fought hard to make sure the few available jobs went to white people. So this is a quote from the Library of Congress. Quote, "The problems of the Great Depression affected virtually every group of Americans. No group was harder hit than African Americans, however. By 1932, approximately half of African Americans were out of work. In some northern cities, whites called for African Americans to be fired from any jobs as long as there were whites out of work." So even if they hadn't migrated there to find work, they'd been living there and working there for forever. And the white community is like, why do they get to keep their jobs when white people don't have jobs?
DEI.
Yeah. Yep.
Jesus.
Racial violence became more common, especially in the South. Lynchings, which had declined to 8 recorded and reported in 1932, surged to 28 in 1933. Oh, so, like, God. It was just a really tumultuous time full of desperation. And then racism provides this, like, we're seeing this play out now, provides this scapegoat where it's like white people can go, oh, it's Black people's fault. They're taking our jobs. Oh, it's immigrants from Mexico. They're coming in and they're causing crime and they're taking our jobs. And it's like, that's not true. But then it, unites people around a common enemy.
Them.
Yeah. And absolves you of responsibility. And it's just really fucked up. And then so many of these stories are not told certainly in schools when we're like learning about the Dust Bowl. Like, we didn't learn about that kind of shit.
No.
And you can see in the main part of my story that I'm about to get to how white privilege allowed for the lifestyle, the like hobo lifestyle that I'm going to discuss, because Black folks are at a much higher risk of harm and death for engaging in this practice, not only from authorities, but from white members of this community and white members of the communities where they were trying to find work.
Yeah. And also when you were talking about like people disappearing and, people are moving around so much, they don't have communities that will be concerned about you if you go missing. It would be so fucking easy to kill and get away with it during this time. Just, you could do whatever the fuck you want.
Yeah. And I mean, it's just really glaringly obvious and like is a stark reminder of like if you Google the Dust Bowl and you look at all these photos, and I looked at a lot of archives and forums around this like hobo migrant part of my case, and the photos are like all white men, which is worth noticing and unpacking and like begs the question, Black people were there. Like Black people were part of this era of American history.
It stretched in through to the South where there were still a lot of Black people just living there from slavery days.
But like this particular community of migrants was predominantly white because they were essentially the safest demographic to be able to engage in this practice. And so like if you're looking at a point in American history and you're noticing like, oh, it's all white people, like there's a reason for that. So, and you know, that's not just in American history, that's also like right now.
That's really interesting to point out. I hadn't really thought about that.
It's still a pervasive thing if you're, you know, in a space or learning about an industry or an area or whatever that is predominantly white. It just begs the question, like, why is that? And we know that the answer is racism, but like
You dig a little deeper.
Right. Dig a little deeper because there's racism in policy. There's racism in homeownership. Like there's all these ways that systemically this segregation happens. And this was one of those things where this was like a very segregated practice that was predominantly white people who could engage in this because it was safest for them to do so. That's kind of the long and short of it.
They survived longer doing it.
So all that to say, what I want to focus on today is the survival lifestyle of the quote unquote hobo and train hopping, which was
so excited
very
about
popular and necessary for a lot of people around this time.
Did you know there's a hobo, the hobo museum in Britt, Iowa?
Yes, and I read about it, but I did read that it opened in 2006 and that exhibit was only supposed to be around for like 2 years, but that it stayed open until 2020. I don't know if it's still open.
I hope so. I went there in 2011.
It's supposed to be fascinating.
It's so cool. And they have a festival every year, Hobo Days.
There you go.
They have a hobo king and queen.
There you go. So thousands of mostly white men and boys known as hobos traveled the country by illegally hopping freight trains in search of work. I thought this was interesting because I was like, where did the term hobo come from? So I pulled this from Wikipedia. A hobo is a migrant worker in the United States. Hobos, tramps, and bums are generally regarded as related but distinct. A hobo travels and is willing to work. A tramp travels but avoids work if possible. So I think of that kid from the book he wrote or whatever, Into the Wild, who called himself like something super tramp. He was just like wandering and camping and he ended up eating poison berries and dying. Spoiler alert, but that's a really old story. But anyway, he did a little work, but he was mostly doing it just because he wanted to like pull away from society and experience this way of life. He wasn't doing it out of necessity to like migrate to another place just only to find work.
He intentionally burned all of his cash and his driver's license and all that stuff.
Exactly.
He wanted to like be removed.
Yep. So that would fall under the tramp, quote unquote, terminology.
Super
and then
trained.
a bum, they say, neither travels nor works. The origin of the term hobo is unknown. According to etymologist Anatoly Lieberman, the only certain detail about its origin is the word was first noticed in American English circa 1890. The term has also been dated to 1889 in the western, probably northwestern United States, and to 1888. Lieberman points out that many folk etymologies fail to answer the question, why did the word become widely known in California by the early 1890s? Author Todd DePestino mentions possible derivations from hoboy, H-O-E, meaning farmhand, or a greeting, ho boy,
Oh, boy.
but that he does not find these convincing. Bill Bryson suggests in Made in America, published in 1998, that it might come from the railroad greeting hobo, B-E-A-U, or a syllabic abbreviation of homeward bound.
Homeward bound.
It could
I like that.
I like that one too. It could also come from the words homeless boy or homeless bohemian. H.L. Mencken, in his The American Language, 4th edition, 1937, wrote, tramps and hobos are commonly lumped together, but in their own sight, they are sharply differentiated. A hobo, or beau, is simply a migratory laborer. He may take some longish holidays, but soon or late, he returns to work. A tramp never works if it can be avoided. He simply travels. Lower than either is the bum, who neither works nor travels, save when impelled to motion by the police. So I thought that was like kind of funny.
That is what was ingrained in my head from the Hobo Museum.
There you
Hobos
go.
aren't hobos work. They just like to travel for free.
Exactly. Some hobos engaged in small-time theft, while more often were victims of crime themselves, attacked by railway police, rail operators, or other desperate travelers. This was a super dangerous practice for many reasons. Like hopping freight trains that are not meant for passengers is dangerous,
You can get cut in half real easy.
A lot of people died. But hobo culture has been around since long before the Dust Bowl. It dates back to the 1800s. And basically, it's been around since like cross-country trains were a thing. And the culture does continue today, though it's harder now with modern technology on trains to like surveil and protect the trains to actually train hop than it used to be.
Yeah, probably not many like box cars with the sliding doors. They're mostly all like big shipping container looking things.
Yeah, it's definitely harder to hop on and off of a train. Not that it wasn't fucking hard then. And I did find an amazing website that archived firsthand accounts of rail riders and hobos. And here are some that will give you an idea of the experience during the Dust Bowl. So this is an account from Vern Smith from 1936. He's from Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and he was just out of high school and looking for work. At Pocatello, Idaho, found a freight train going east, a Union Pacific refrigerated train hauling perishable produce. We went down the track to catch the train. It was a long one. It took some time to get up speed. We caught the first boxcar, back of the engine, climbed on top, found the reefer. So the reefer is like how to get through the top of the train.
Oh.
Found the reefer. Yeah, so
hatch.
my understanding is like these train cars, especially the refrigerated ones, wouldn't have the side openings. They'd be loaded by like a crane or something through the top.
Mm-hmm. Through a hatch.
And that top hatch, they call at least these folks called the reefer.
Okay.
Found the reefer sealed, so jumped to the next car, found that one sealed also.
Oh, wait. No, the reefer means refrigerated. Because remember when in trucker crimes?
Oh, I guess
we had
so.
the reefer car, the
all
reefer
right. Well,
trucks.
either way, so all of these boxes, but they still had the top load and they couldn't, because they're on top.
Yeah.
But yes, good call. So anyway, they jumped to the next one. That's sealed too. We went the full length of the train, found them all sealed. It was getting cold. We didn't know what to do. We jumped all the cars going back to the front. In the meantime, the engine blew off steam. It froze to the top of the boxcar. My brother came after I did. He slipped and nearly fell off the boxcar. The roof of the boxcar had raised webs about 2 inches high. He got hold of them and held on for dear life. I got hold of him, pulled him to the top and on the catwalk. We knew we had to do something or freeze to death. We twisted off the seal of the reefer and got inside. I got a cinder in my eye helping my brother. I was occupied trying to get the cinder out of my eye. I noticed my brother wasn't talking. I shook him. He was drowsy, so like hypothermia.
And he's still clinging on?
I think they're inside now, but it's a refrigerated truck, so they're not really protected from the cold. We always carried a rope with us to tie the lever down so nobody could lock us in. I crawled out on top, tied the rope around my brother's shoulders as he had already passed out. I got him out and he came too. So he climbed back. His brother's like fucked up from probably hypothermia. He uses the rope to like pull him back out through the top of the train.
Oh my God.
I got him out and he came too. This all taking place at night. It was getting daylight. Here were 2 young men riding on top of a refrigerated boxcar and it was cold. We nearly froze to death. Came into Cheyenne, Wyoming. When the train showed up into the station, we got off. Cheyenne has a railroad detectives school, so detectives were everywhere. Ooh. Detectives disguised as railroad laborers. We rode this train into Omaha, Nebraska, which is a big terminal for Union Pacific. After the train sidetracked for a passenger train, we got off to get something to eat. We stayed in the depot that night. The next morning, we were walking in the terminal looking for a train going to Minneapolis. A man dressed as a laborer asked where we were going. We said Minneapolis. He said, "Are you catching a train?" We said, "Yes. Could you help us find the right one?" He showed us his badge and said he was a detective. We had 2 choices, go to jail or buy a ticket to Minneapolis. He didn't know we had money in our shoes, so we bought a bus ticket. In early 1937, I met a wonderful and beautiful girl. We dated till October 1937, and we got married. She has been my friend and wife for 55 years.
Oh.
But yeah, that's like harrowing.
Yes.
They almost, like, his brother almost died. I'm actually kind of amazed that he survived.
All night long.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God. The steam freezing into ice.
Yeah.
Ooh.
So here is another one by W.R. Kingston, and this is a story out of California. There must have been 10 or 15 fellows in the group. When we asked if we could join them, they were most hospitable. One of them asked us to scout around for some more firewood, and they would share their dinner with us. The men were A1L, dressed in overalls and light jackets, and they proved to be very friendly. I'm not sure what A1L means, but I think it's like laborers. Of course, they were surprised that a couple of young punks would be riding the rails for a vacation, and they explained that all of them were out of work and that they would be going out west where the chances of finding jobs would be better. After dinner, one of the folks took a guitar out of a case and he gave us a one-man concert. We sang up a storm and of all the old memories most of us knew. Another fellow took his barbering tools out of a case and he gave me a haircut for $0.25. Another fellow loaned us a blanket to give us a comfortable night's sleep. The following morning, the talk centered on the distant points where each of us planned to travel. Jack and I had decided that we would like to go west to the West Coast, which we had heard was a beautiful vacation spot. We were not interested in getting employment. We just wanted to travel, so they were tramps.
Okay.
One of the men suggested that if we were going west, we should go down to the Union Pacific Yards and catch a freighter, which would take us to Cheyenne, Wyoming. This was obviously like a huge waypoint for the trains. We lucked out. We caught an unloaded freight and that had its doors wide open. We jumped into one of the cars and we were on our way. It proved to be a full day of travel. When night came, we huddled up together on the floor of the boxcar and we tried to sleep. Finally, it became daybreak and the train had stopped in North Platte, Nebraska to take on coal and water. From our vantage point, looking out of the open door, we spotted a milk delivery man who had just left 4 quarts of milk on the doorstep of a house nearby. Being hungry and thirsty, we hoped that the customer wouldn't miss those 4 quarts on the doorstep of his home until after we were long gone. I truly believe that was the first time either of us had ever stolen anything. After drinking the milk, we found a place where we could wash out the bottles, and we took them to a nearby bakery where we redeemed them for $0.05 apiece, and we bought 20 cents worth of sweet rolls.
Oh, smart.
It was then back to our train, and we headed west. We were told that we would have to be very careful when entering Cheyenne because at that terminal, the railroads hired guards who would shoot a bum on sight.
But
that
they
really
weren't
worried
bums,
us.
they were tramps.
Yeah, I know. Well, they're self-identifying.
Yeah.
Maybe they wanted to travel and they didn't want to work. So maybe they are bums. I don't know.
Okay, all right.
Oh, but Wikipedia said bums also don't travel. I don't know. Not my words. That really worried us. For either of us was too young to die. I mean, a lot of these people that were doing this were like 17, 18 years old. Like they were kids.
Yeah.
As the train slowed down before entering the railroad yards in Cheyenne, we looked for a place where we could jump off. We found a perfect place, and feet first, both of us jumped into a ravine, which led down into a creek bed. After dusting ourselves off, we walked into Cheyenne, wondering what train we might be able to catch going west. We didn't want to cross paths with those railroad guards. In the railroad yard, we struck up conversation with a fellow who had appeared to know his way around. He recommended that if we wanted to catch a train going west out of Cheyenne, we should walk 4 or 5 miles out of the yards where the trains would still be gathering steam for the long climb ahead. We followed his advice. So like they're moving, but they're slow because they're like making their way uphill.
Yeah,
so
they're
it's
going
easy
up
to
and
hop
they're
on.
probably really long trains.
Mm-hmm. We followed his advice and we walked until we thought we were safely out of the yard. Unfortunately, by the time the trains reached our point, they were traveling too fast to catch. After sitting out a second train, which too was gathering too much steam, we walked back into the train yards of Cheyenne, wondering what to do now.
That'd be so scary, just running alongside a fully going train.
Trying to assess in real time, like, do we hop together? Do we not? Like, how dangerous is it?
What if we throw our bags in and we can't jump in after them?
Mm-hmm.
Ah.
Another person we talked with suggested that we catch a freight train going to Denver, and from there we should have no trouble finding a train that would take us west. We decided to give it a try. Again, we walked 4 to 5 miles out of the yards, this time going to Denver. The choice of transportation proved to be much different. The first train that came through was not going too fast, but all the cars were closed. We had to climb up on top of a car and to lie down on our bellies to keep from being seen. We had not taken into consideration that it was evening when we boarded the train and that we would travel through the night, and that in that area, the nights became very, very cold. It was an awful experience. By the time the train reached its destination in Denver, we were more than half frozen. We could not use our limbs, but we had to get off that boxcar before being arrested for being bums. With great effort, we were able to use our arms and hands. We crawled down the side ladder of the boxcar and we fell to the ground to get to our feet. Both of us massaged our legs and feet until finally we were able to stand. The time seemed endless, for we didn't want to be caught hanging around the train. With supreme effort, we walked out of the yard and we went to a nearby market where we bought a large can of pork and beans and a loaf of bread and a quart of milk. Never had a breakfast tasted as good.
Sounds good. I'm really hungry.
I know, it really does.
I wanna
At that
finish my
point, we
chicken.
decided we truly didn't want to take the time to go to the West Coast and that we would try to catch a train from Denver to Kansas City. They're like, this is too fucking hard. We have to do this for another like million fucking miles.
I don't need to see the beach that bad.
No. We heard from someone that we might be able to catch an express train, which would leave shortly after dark. We waited around for the full day, hoping to catch that manifest train, which would be carrying fresh fruits and vegetables from California to the Midwest and East Coast markets. Our waiting proved to be worthwhile.
Ooh.
Soon after dark, a train pulled in for ice and water. We climbed aboard. Again, all of the boxcars were closed and sealed. We had to climb up onto the top of one of the cars. All was going well until about an hour after our departure. We saw a brakeman carrying a lantern on top of the train, heading our way, walking from the engine to the end of the train. We had heard, too, that if caught on a manifest train, we would get thrown off bodily at speeds ranging up to 100 miles an hour.
Don't.
Brother, we were really in trouble.
Don't throw them.
Deciding that there was nothing better to do, each of us would climb down the side of the car on opposite sides. So there's a ladder on each side of the car, and they each got on one ladder and hope for the best.
So if he found one of them, he'd probably only find one of them. Oh, no.
We hugged each other and shook hands, and we headed for the ladders.
Oh, God.
That brakeman kept coming. The reflection of his lantern showed that he swung that lantern between the cars to check up on the coupling of the cars. When he reached our car, with Jack hanging from the ladder on one side of the car and I on the other, that brakeman must have stayed at that location for several minutes, seconds probably, before he moved on to the next train car. When the reflection from his lantern finally showed that he was far away from us, each of us must have had minds that were computer-driven, for both of us raised his head above the ladder at the same second. It was unbelievable. Again, we shook hands and we hugged each other, giving thanks that miracles can happen.
So the brakeman was looking in the spots between each car, not on the sides.
And didn't look at the ladders on the sides. Probably because it would take him really like leaning over the side of the moving train. It's probably not very safe for him to do that. So he just didn't. He looked at other like common places that people would hide on the trains. So they just missed him. They just missed being caught. And like they'll shoot you.
Or throw you off.
Like it was, they don't fuck around. Like it was not.
I wonder what their real motivations were, just because that was their job.
Well, we'll kind of talk about that, but for the most part, conductors weren't so much like aggrieved by hobos hopping the trains, but the companies that owned the freight were very precious about it. And didn't want it being stolen and didn't want it being fucked with. And so they hired cops, basically.
Damn.
To protect the property, even if it meant killing the people.
Jesus Christ.
That were riding the trains. So, yeah, some things never fucking change.
Yeah.
Community was key for hobos who would try their best to care for each other along the way, whether they were traveling companions or just strangers that they met at random. So this is a really short little one, but I just thought this painted a picture. This is written by Werner Worth, who was 17 years old in 1937 and was a rail rider. At Rowelton, Kansas, breaking rocks for 1 hour behind jail earned him a meal. A group of us had just come into a small freight yard, hungry and dirty from a long ride, so they would do like manual labor to get a little bit of food. Mm-hmm. There was among us an older man who took upon himself to gather us together, and in his gentle manner of persuasion, he taught us a very good survival technique. He taught us we would fare better as a group than as individuals in search of something to eat. He paired us up and gave each pair an assignment to carry out, on which we all agreed. This man was smart enough to know that in some of the empty boxcars there would be some spilled beans and other food items from broken sacks that could be cleaned and used for our dinner that night. Some went and gathered this material in abundance. Others came back from town with salt pork, bread, spices like salt and pepper, and vegetables. A fire was quickly started, and there was a large pot where all the edibles were deposited and then cooked by the older man.
Is it suggested that they were stolen from town?
I think there was a little bit of theft, a little bit of scavenging, and then there were certainly people in these towns that were empathetic to the migrant workers and would offer food, even lodging, to some of these folks that were coming through town. So I think it's a combo of all of those things.
Are you going to talk about the language?
Oh, yes. That's what I'm going to finish with.
Yes.
when all was ready, we all sat down ready for a good meal. At that very moment, this man got us all down on our knees and offered up a prayer of thanksgiving for our good fortune. So there's a lot of stories from this era of like cooking food, collectively cooking food that they'd scavenged over an open flame, playing the banjo, playing guitar, like spending a night in community together before everybody kind of went on their own way in whatever direction the next day.
Like, I know I'm romanticizing it in my head because, of course, again, this was not safe behavior for women. This was not safe behavior for people of color. But there's something kind of sweet about
community.
it. Yeah.
Community is community. Yeah. And, you know, that can be true even with all of the other isms and shitty things that were like kind of sewn into the tapestry. Because like those isms and shitty things are sewn into the entire tapestry of all of our existence. And yet, like, it speaks to human nature that we all find community in different ways. So, yeah, I mean, it's easy to romanticize it because a bunch of people in similar circumstances pooling their resources and then, like, cooking and communing together is a heartwarming thing that is like part of the human experience. So I think that's totally, you know, fair to feel that way.
Yeah.
Something as elusive as the origin of the name hobo is hobo code, a fascinating symbol-based shorthand that travelers would leave on trains in common areas that gave some indication of who had been there before them and what could be found in the area.
I fucking loved that. This is what stuck out the most to me from the Hobo Museum. It was so cool.
It is very cool. And like I said, it is elusive and we'll get to it. So this is from Atlas Obscura. Quote, they alerted other transient workers to trouble, such as an aggressive dog or hostile police force, but could also point the way to clean water or a hot meal. 3 lines might mean a good place to camp. An upside-down triangle signaled a spoiled road. A cat was code for a kind woman. And while some of these codes were etched into trees or train cars or under bridges, more often they were intentionally impermanent and written in chalk so as not to leave too clear a trail for police to track down the community. While some conductors were protective of their trains, others were sympathetic to travelers and would offer gestures of food or temporary lodging in their homes. Others would be cautious of how they operated the train, like limiting the push of the engines through tunnels so as to avoid toxic exhaust trapped in the tunnel with train riders.
Oh my gosh.
And so there could be codes on some of these trains that are like, there's a decent conductor that runs this train. Like, he's not going to sick the dogs on you, basically.
Wow. That's
These
so
gestures
cool.
didn't go unnoticed and were the kinds of things that could be communicated to other travelers in code. But hobo code, as a staple of American history, has also been refuted. While cases of it clearly existed, many of the more permanent carvings are thought to be staged. Newspapers of the era were running anti-hobo propaganda that touted hobo codes that never existed. The practice is shrouded in mystery, which makes it all the more titillating. Because especially, like, if the majority of it was in chalk, then it wouldn't survive for us to be able to look back on it and go, that's hobo code from this day.
Yeah.
And then some of the research suggests that a lot of the permanent, like the etched ones, weren't legitimate. They might have been planted. They might be more modern, like part of the lore, not like actually being used in the way that we've learned hobo code, quote unquote, was used.
Or like I just said, like people romanticized it and then they might like, ooh, let's jump on a train. Let's write some hobo code. Let's have a fun, like 7-hour and not like a lifestyle.
Yeah, it was just fascinating to read about how hard, and that Atlas Obscura article that I am referencing for this portion is where I learned about that museum in Iowa. And that like the museum did have compelling evidence to support hobo code being real, but that there is other evidence that some experts and like historians believe outweighs that the real evidence.
Okay.
So like we think it was used. We don't know how common a practice it was. And the hobo code that we have access to, like for instance, I put a photo on the drive from that Atlas Obscura article that maps out some quote unquote hobo code. None of it might have been used. Like this could have been propagandized by newspapers, romanticized by people who were engaging with or fascinated with the lifestyle. Like, we don't know if these symbols were even in use at that time. Because if they were leaving each other messages, it was in chalk for the most part. And then other accounts, like firsthand accounts of that time, would reference some of these codes. But for the most part, they were in agreement that like word of mouth was the best way, because then you're not leaving a specific trail that can get you caught. And like you're building that community along the way. And then you pass on that knowledge to the next people who show up in that area. And that was like the much more common way to give each other this kind of information.
It's probably a little bit of both.
But yeah, it's just interesting how pervasive hobo code has remained as like a staple of American folklore, even if it might not be rooted in very much truth. Apparently, it only takes a little bit, and then for a newspaper to fucking run with it and publish all these keys, all these codes, but it was just fucking propaganda. Like, none of that shit was even legitimate that they were publishing. I thought that was so interesting.
That is interesting. Also, like, the code itself is pretty subjective, so...
Very subjective.
It's like... And it changes all the time. It washes away with the rain. No part of it is permanent or like cemented. It's going to be evolving and changing.
Yeah, it's kind of like a fluid, semi-lost language.
Yeah.
That there's literally no way to know like how much or how little it was used, how much was real, how much was false. It's kind of a gray area, which I thought was really fucking fascinating. What's known for sure is that hobo and traveler graffiti has been and remains a real thing forever. But it was usually their own monikers or nicknames, and then a date and like an arrow pointing in the direction that they were heading, just to be like, I was here and this is where I'm going, but not necessarily leave any additional information about the area or where they had been.
A warm lady.
But the ever elusive hobo code markings are still up for debate on their legitimacy and whether they are simply lore born from admiration of the lifestyle and propaganda against the lifestyle.
So if you want more information, first of all, I think Hobo Days is still a thing in Britt, Iowa. In 2024, it was from August 8th through 10th. So mid-August. The museum is only open from Memorial Day through Hobo Days. So it's only open during the summer.
Okay.
But if you want more information on this, go to BritHoboDays.com. Brit is BRITT. Brit Hobo Days.
I'm adding it to my sources. Amazing.
The Hobo Museum. I just have to read this one part. The National Hobo Museum began as the dream of 3 lifelong hobos and former hobo kings. Determined to preserve the history of the American hobo, these men formed the Hobo Foundation in the mid-1970s. The foundation, made up of hobos and residents of Britt, Iowa, home to the National Hobo Convention since 1900.
Yeah.
Tasked themselves with ensuring that the stories of the American hobo and Brit Hobo Days would be told for generations to come. You gotta go. You gotta go. They have a gift shop.
It's definitely a fascinating practice and is still a thing. Like, I don't know what name he's going by now, but what I was following an artist on Instagram, I still am, for a long time, who sold his art online to kind of survive, but did a lot of graffiti art and was like a train hopper through the American Southwest for fucking years and just like
gorgeous.
Stayed in communal housing or crashed on people's couches and would like make art with things that he found in the environment. So like he would paint on rocks or like pieces of metal that had like fallen off of trains that he had ridden.
Cool.
And I have one of his pieces in my office that's not on a rock that he found, but it's like super fucking cool and his art is really amazing.
Send me that link too.
I will, because now I don't. It used to be Maiden rock, but now I don't know what moniker he goes by, so I'm not sure. But
fucking fascinating.
Yeah, it really fascinating.
This episode.
Yeah, it definitely opened up conversations about a lot of different things. I mean, the Dust Bowl is like you said, we could have an entire podcast could devote themselves to this era and this phenomena and
just how like something like soil erosion devastated our economy.
Yeah, and it was
all these uprisings,
predominantly man-made,
cultural. Yeah, all of these cultural trends and fucking cool. I just I love starting with one specific topic and then the ripple just being like way more than we were going for.
Yeah. It was a fascinating, and even it was like hard for me to narrow down one thing, but then in the process of trying to find what I was connecting with. I read and learned like so much wild shit about this time in American history that either we did learn and I just forgot, or we never learned.
We didn't learn about
both.
No, we learned about the woman in the picture gazing at the horizon with her dirty kids. That's pretty much it. And like FDR. And apparently some of us didn't even learn about FDR.
We probably did, and I just forgot that part because like
We did.
boring.
It's okay. Boring.
Boring.
WPA.
W who? But we did it,
WP
y'all.
lame.
Boo.
Okay, thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Wine and Crime. Our cover art is by Danielle Sylvan. Music by Phil Young and Corey Wendell. Editing by Jonathan Camp. Our production manager is Andrea Gardner. For photos, sources, and other resources, head to wineandcrimepodcast.com. You can follow us on all the socials at Wine and Crime Pod. If you'd like to show your support and get access to all sorts of wine-fueled bonus content, check out our premium channel at wineandcrimepodcast.com/uncorked. Cheers!
This episode of Wine and Crime is brought to you by Progressive Insurance.
Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies.
Try it at Progressive.com.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.